The next morning, one of the local people, seeing him, of course, was curious. Who is this? Came over and inquired, and Barbara and Francis said, "Well, I'm looking for land." And they said, "Oh, well, there's a place up at the top of the hill where you might be interested in." So Francis came up, and it was an old, run-down pineapple farm, as you probably know. This whole area was all overgrown with lantana and shrubs, trees. The pineapple plants were still there. There were still fields of pineapples, but rotting. And Francis felt that this was the right place, and he sent a long cable to Barbara, as long as that, quite a length, in which he detailed every possible aspect that he could think of with regard to the place, where it was, its location, details of it, and so forth. And Barbara sent a reply back saying, "It is eminently suitable, purchase it." So that's how it came to be purchased. And the money came from the remainder of the money that Francis had been willed by the Baron. So again, we are this place, this blessed place of pilgrimage, exists, you could say, also because of the blessing of the Baron von Frankenberg.
And his wife.
And his wife, yeah.
And same for Mayor House.
Yeah.
So where is actually, is it this side or which side Francis camped?
Down that side.
So
The entrance, the Bruce Highway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which wasn't the Bruce Highway then.
Yeah.
It was a road that ran through the Palmwoods, Woombye. Yeah, it was very, very much a rural area. Interestingly enough, the area, as we gradually found out, was studded a great deal with religious groups, not necessarily recognised churches. There were those, but also alternative. Yeah, there were quite a.
So say from the beginning it is a spiritual area.
Yes, exactly, which was interesting. Not that Francis knew at that time.
And I was also told that Aborigines used to come to the
That's right.
hill to do some prayers.
Yes.
What's your take on that?
Yes, there was definitely evidence of Aboriginals being in the area, but otherwise I don't know.
So what
You
were
could
what
ask.
were they coming for here?
I don't know. It was an extremely rich wooded area.
Oh.
I do know that. A lot of beautiful timbers, not just gums, but all sorts of excellent timbers. And what happened was that this hill, particularly this, which is the core of an old volcano, as it is with other hills around. What happened was that the early settlers to Australia realised the richness of the timber of this total area, including this hill, this so-called mountain, which of course is only really a hill, 500 foot high. But and having the river present, they sailed up the river and loaded the ships with logs, which they'd cut from the
So where
timbers
is
here.
the river?
This side, it flows into the sea,
Oh,
Marucci River.
the Murichi River.
River. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so that's what happened with this. All I know with this particular hill, it was timbered 3 times, and of course each time it was timbered, thousands of tons of soil disappeared, and so what was left was only pockets of decent soil, and a lot of soil that had become completely leached and unproductive. It no longer had the nutrients or whatever you
Bill,
say.
so when did you start working on the property, getting ready?
Yes. So by the time Francis bought the property and began to prepare it was February of 1958.
Wow.
So there was February, I can't remember to what extent of February, but February, March, April, May. But virtually you could say it was the beginning of June.
Yeah.
It came right in the beginning of June.
Right in the hot, rainy part.
Yeah, and it was very much, it was incredibly difficult. The rain was ceaseless for periods. We lived in a sea of red mud.
What was this place like when you first appeared here? What did
So
it look like?
Francis bought in December, came back to Sydney.
No, I think he travelled up. It could have been late December into January.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it was January before he discovered this. Perhaps cables would establish all this. I don't remember the particular dates. January, and by the time he purchased it and could begin work on it, it was February. Maybe the beginning of Feb, but it could have been mid. All I know is that, no, I don't think he came back.
Oh, okay.
No.
So
I don't. All I know, as soon as I was notified about it, I arranged with the Army. I was still a psychologist working with the Army. I arranged for a transfer to Brisbane, and that, and using my holidays and unpaid leave, I would come up on the weekends and, during my leave periods and so forth. I did everything. I spent quite a lot of time, and that's how I know how difficult it was.
What was the property like when you first came?
The property was quite overgrown, completely unkempt, you could say.
It was
It was I talked about that. Very much a rundown pineapple farm. Fields of pineapples were rotting. Areas that had been used for pineapples were completely overgrown with lantana and low-growing bushes and creepers.
But you still got.
There was a track into the property, which still exists near Francis's grave. That track came in and then dropped down onto that level, and the farmhouse was on that knoll, which we'll walk around, and I'll show you those spots, those areas, whenever.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so you started working, and Francis tried
Yeah.
to clear the.
And then we determined, we drew up plans of what to do. It was a matter of how much money was available, and so a kit, a wool shed kit was purchased. It was the cheapest and of course the most durable. Steel would last presumably
Yeah.
more than timber. But we can talk about all this when we come to 58.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
Good.
J. Barber.
J. Barber.
There you go. J. Barber.
J. Barber, that's right, J. Barber. Yeah. At first, Barber's visit to Avatar's abode, to the property, was scheduled for the second week of June. But then this period was moved forward. I'd forgotten that point. He actually landed on the 2nd of June. This gave barely 3 months in which to prepare a house, meeting hall, roads and accommodation for the Australian lovers, and establish a water supply and other necessities before his arrival. For all of us, and particularly for Francis, it was a period of extremely satisfying, intense and exhausting work. During the 3 months of preparation, a new road of even curve and even grading was cut around the side of the hilltop to Barber's house. The farmhouse was removed in one piece and replaced on a slight ridge below and about 150 yards distant from Barber's house.
Oh,
That's the Rouse's house.
It's the Rouse's house.
is it the same structure? Are you
Yeah,
guys
same, exactly the same.
very big?
Right, yeah, and it was, in those days it was on the back of a truck. Can you imagine? We all held our breath as it went down the slope.
And it had been raining.
And we sort of watched, petrified that it might fall off, you know.
Yeah.
Roads were constructed to the farmhouse and to various sections of the property to assist movement and to allow Barber to inspect the property if he desired. All roads within the area were strengthened, channeled with gutters and drainage pipes, and laid with concrete where necessary. A large meeting hall was erected near Barber's house, and on the same level, a further area was cleared and levelled, and tents were erected for the men attending the sahavas. Toilets, bathrooms, and tank stands were constructed. Beds, tables, and benches were made, some for the lovers, and especially custom-built items for beloved Barber. Curtains, linen, and house decorations were prepared by the women for Barber and the Mundley. An internal telephone system was connected to all major points: Barber's house, farmhouse, and the men's quarters. The trees, gardens, and paths in the immediate area of Barber's house were trimmed, formed, or beautified as required. But the principal and outstanding work was the construction of Barber's house. The building was purchased from a series of standard designs for a wool or farm produce building, with wooden floor, steel girders, and roof structure, braced throughout with timber. And the roof and walls were sheeted with corrugated iron. On one side was a long, low, open veranda with a roof of iron also. Since then, this veranda has been enclosed, so it is difficult now to visualize exactly how beloved Barber was driven in the car beneath the veranda, and how he was assisted from the car and given the key to open his house. The house is 60 feet long. Yeah, that's right. And 20 feet wide. Barber's room set within the outer walls of the building is 17.5 by 15.5 feet, approximately. The remaining 40 by 20 feet contained 4 simple beds at one end, hidden by a curtain hanging from one of the steel roof girders. There is no inner lining or ceiling, and the outer corrugated iron is visible. Near the curtain on one side was a table with 4 wooden chairs where the Mundley accompanying Barber could eat, and in one corner outside Barber's room was a screened area approximately 7 by 7 feet as a bathroom for Barber. Sorry, for him.
Both of those would have been on the window side,
On
east.
the bathroom was on the far side of Barber's door, you know, to his bedroom.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it is not where the current bathrooms are.
No, it was inside.
When we do it in Bob's house, he'll show.
I'll show you exactly. Apart from the double doors leading into the house, there were a number of simple louver windows set into the walls to give light and ventilation. The original plan was for Barber's house to be a temporary structure, and Barber's room was built in such a manner that it could be dismantled in sections and re-erected exactly the same in a permanent structure located on the highest point of Kiel Mountain. Its present location, which of course has now become the permanent one, is some 50 to 100 feet lower than the highest point commonly known as the Trig Point. On Francis's return to Australia from India in 1969, we spent many hours discussing and sketching proposed permanent structures to house the heart of Avatar's abode, Barber's bedroom. But over the years I realised more and more that it should be left where it is, in order that we and all future pilgrims to Avatar's abode might visualise and absorb Barber's arrival, stay and departure on the original site. But to return to the preparations of Barber's house and the property for his visit. In the final month before the Sahavas, much remained to be done, and work was continued from dawn to late at night under pressure lamps. But by 2nd June, the finishing touches and general cleaning up were completed. The paths and driveways surrounding Barber's house and meeting hall were all freshly laid with cinders. Garden plots were formed with stone, and the house was prepared for the arrival of Barber. May Lundquist, who greatly assisted in the preparation work, later wrote of this time, "I was given the job of helping the carpenters, something which greatly suited me and which seemed to suit Diana Snow even better. Both Diana and I helped to sand the wood for the most important place of all, the Barber room. By now, the walls were up, and the important thing was to match the wood for this special chamber, which was built well inside the outer walls. The ceiling had to have light-coloured timber, while the walls were to be in darker timber, turpentine, which is nearly a redwood. They have some really beautiful wood in Australia. It is always difficult to get the material on time, and sometimes Roy Bolsh would have to do some other work until the material arrived."
So Roy Bolsh is a carpenter.
He was travelling with his family. Mary Bolsh was the Barber lover, but Roy became through association. And he and Mary and their children, which was
Peter Bosch.
Peter Bosch. I think there's 5 of them.
There are 2 people I saw.
Big family.
It was a big family.
2 people I saw. One, the daughter lives in Crow's Nest, isn't she?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes.
yes, that's right.
Yes.
And but they moved to Toowoomba now.
Ah,
Yeah. But they a bit isolate themselves.
Yes, yes.
their nature.
I
Yes.
told them to come home.
No.
We'll have a Baba prayer.
Yes,
No.
They did work,
They-
remember when we had Hobson?
Yes,
They had,
yeah. Yes, they keep to themselves.
There's another
Anyway, they were travelling in a caravan, just touring Australia somewhat, and they happened to come and visit. I'm sorry, I don't know how it was
maybe
done.
Francis.
Francis and I, Mary Bolsh was also a budding artist who had studied at the art gallery in Melbourne and knew Francis.
Oh,
Ah,
And I met her. I can remember meeting her in the, middle 40s. But it turned out that anyway, they came. Barbara's plan. In other words, we couldn't have managed without his help, because it turned out that he was not only was he a very strong man, physically strong and enduring, could work long hours, but he was also a self-made carpenter, but good enough. It was like Reg Paffel, who was Reg Paffel was really the outstanding barber, lover, general handyman. He would turn his hand to all sorts of things, yeah. And but anyway, Roy and Mary did put in. Not only did they work tremendously to get the property ready. Roy was invaluable, but they also contributed £100 to the expenses, which Barbara ordered Francis to return to them. Which I again is an example of Barbara's compassion and thoughtfulness, because they needed it.
yeah.
They would have departed with nothing.
yeah.
Yeah, I continue to have some correspondence with Mary Bolsh in Melbourne, but there was these things happen, and Roy Bolsh, I think, with age, I don't know what his condition was, but he suddenly decided that he was a perfect master.
Roy Bosch.
Yeah, and as a result, Mary supported him, and so contact faded out over the years. And of course, they've long gone.
She was only recently passed away, didn't she?
Mary?
Yeah.
Really? I was that interesting. I didn't know. I'm sorry.
I think she came
I missed that.
She came where you guys, you were not here for the June Sahawasas, Spring Sahawasas, the 1965.
Oh, when Peter, her son and daughter, Christine
Yeah.
was the son of the Shipways, who had met Barbara in '62.
Anyways, that's a
Shipways,
different.
okay.
It's a Shipway.
Bosch.
No,
But Peter is a Bolsh. Mary is Mary and
Bosch. That's
yeah.
why I actually got
Yeah.
the mistake.
And there were other children, but what's happened to them, I don't know.
Oh, okay.
But yes, I didn't realise that. I hadn't seen Mary for, oh, my goodness, I don't know, 40 years or something. Yeah, I had some correspondence, but particularly after I had been with Barbara in 1967, when Barbara, you know, obviously gave me the job,
The wishes.
and directed that I should really get busy and spread his name and message and develop the 2 properties.
So was it a lot of that time that you were working? I'd heard that it was really raining, a lot of it.
Oh, there was heavy tropical rainfall, particularly during February and March. The weather pattern has changed somewhat, but I can recall in February, in those times, in the 58 into the 60s, I can remember heavy rain for a week, not letting up.
I can remember even as late as when I arrived, it would rain, and if you were in the meeting hall, you couldn't hear yourself talking to the other person.
It was impossible.
Pounding.
And then there was also on occasion there would be like we would get the outer skirts of a cyclone, so that the rain would be even heavier. And I remember trying to drive once out of the property, and it was impossible. I couldn't see. The windscreen wipers just didn't do anything. It was so heavy.
So you just decided to stay.
So I just didn't go. we stayed put. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the mosquitoes were really bad.
And the mosquitoes were so heavy, so incredible, that we were only able to work in clearing the scrub for a few minutes at a time. We would be literally covered. And then we'd go out into the clear spot and brush them all off and get back and do a bit more, you know. And I can recall, you know, because I'm essentially an office man, not a labourer, and I can remember being so tired, my body so unaccustomed, that I literally didn't know whether to sit or stand. I didn't know what to do with my body. It was just one intense ache.
And another interesting thing, I thought, you know, when they were moving the farmhouse down to where it is now, where the Rouse is, going down that hill, and yet not even a window was broken.
Yes, it was. It was quite amazing that, and that of course was, again, it was organised by a countryman from Bundaberg, I think.
Okay.
He was quite a character, but he knew what he was doing in a countryman fashion, if you know what I mean. There was perhaps no finesse about it, but he got the job done, and we lifted the